Yeah, they explained that. Turn it around. In the evenings. 4 to 7 kind of thing.
Yeah. You know, clerk's office. Busy.
I did bring it. It's called, that's it. Thank you.
My name's Marissa, by the way.
What's your?
Marissa.
Marissa.
Mhm.
Okay, so I'm Paul, and that's Bill.
Good to go?
I appreciate Brian giving us printed because it's super expensive to print color. Y'all probably have a really fancy machine and he hits one button.
Oh, yeah. All of our printers are really. Printer always gets jammed. Always, always. It's like, that's.
Golly, I did one for one of these committee meetings, just out of my own pocket. I spent $70 to make 5 packets. You know, at FedEx, I think it must have been 40 or 50 cents a page. So oh, please, I don't want to do that again. Subcommittee of this. There's a revenue committee, expenditure committee, and there's a gap committee.
I was gonna say that.
Now I know. And Brian, he's so responsive. I send him anything. Thank you, it's done.
But Brian Powell?
Brian Powell. Yeah, I don't know who works under who.
Yeah.
I just know who gets stuff done.
Who's on your president wing?
He assistant to Marcus, right? In fact, he would have taken, Jenny first was assistant to David James. She went with him.
Yep.
She has been tremendous help in this project. Oh, man, I say, I need to get corrections data. Man, email goes out, chief, you need to meet with Paul Coombs, blah, 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 next week. Okay, he calls me. Boom.
Jenny's the one who's doing
What's that?
it. Jenny's the one who's doing that?
Jenny's the one, and she must know them all real well because they respond. Yeah. Well, she works mayor's office.
I know.
Yeah. I agree.
Where is he? The police?
He's deputy mayor,
Deputy.
or he's one of 4 deputy mayors.
Yeah, I think
Testing. Testing.
Don't seem to have a Michigan accent. I, you've got a little bit, Bill. Picked up. Fine. All right. Honey, there's 3 or 4 handouts there.
We have at least. How long? Maybe a minute. Later or something. Yeah, you need it.
Hey, Brian. It's Marissa,
Yeah, hey, Marissa.
clerk in Chambers. Can you hear me?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yeah. Could you please make me the host so I can live stream it?
Uh, sure will. Just a moment. Okay, you should be the host now.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Go fill up too.
I see.
Start on. City has the city, the county has the county. Yes. Okay.
So I'll let you know for sure.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'll see you next week.
Like, for example, corrections. But we have only one jail. That's a,
I mean, I think every county has different, county has different.
Well.
it's not places like Jacksonville, Denver, city and the county have the same thing. But in the weeds, they find out that actually it's, for some services it is, and some it isn't.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know about. Denver, because the sheriff is always. Usually.
Well, they haven't given you one yet. I didn't even notice till you
Did we,
did this.
did we talk? Oh, yeah.
We won't put you on the,
No, I don't.
on the
care.
video.
I don't care.
Like, I'm kind of this guy thing.
Um, Yeah. I know that. So, do you have any like?
A list here. About 8. Want to go get deeper in the weeds? Back. I've got 4 or 5 on police, but I was only going to show them one.
Yeah, can you go to
It's, Brian's not here. Well, it's, you get that all the time.
I know, sorry, it comes up.
You're not quite tall.
No, I don't think I'm making it out there.
See, I won't forget that. Hey, the county came up for the last one.
I went to the first one, took.
going to be wild?
What's
Well,
the date?
huh?
What's the?
We have been going through, the agencies. Getting them to. Matt, this Matt, professor, Louisville, GIS. He's a state department. And GIS. So we got him the, geez, what was it,
2.4 million,
no, but the police.
1.8.
Well, there, 1.8 million records.
You said that was, the hand up was.
Yeah, there's a 25 slides on this. Would you want to film this?
So I think we're gonna wanna.
Doesn't mean that the person was the instant.
I mean, and that gets to the University of Louisville, which is that right there.
Is this Louisville?
And downtown. Daytime population, 60,000. Like 60,000.
I'm from 60.
It is, oh, U of L,
No, downtown.
it's still, well, I mean, it's still counting.
They're working from home.
Well, there's.
The bankers, the lawyers.
I mean, there's some, it's not great data, but
But that's a good point.
it's really,
You got a daytown population, whereas out here, there is no daytown population. You got a heart attack. Yes.
So I mean, the urban services. It's gonna be overestimated.
I'll try to find.
So I have a map of employment density, which we don't have to do today, but
Employment density.
yeah.
Yeah.
From the loads data, yeah. Which is not great because,
It doesn't line up exactly.
well, no, it wouldn't because like JCPS, everyone is
Oh, I see.
Ben Hughes.
Oh, it's not establishment based?
It is for some, like Ford has Ford Chamberlain, Ford Valley. U of L has the main campus and health services campus. The different hospitals are all separate. But like JCPS, Louisville Metro Government, those are not allocated. And so you can sort of get at it by looking at the industrial breakdown. But it's not perfect, but I mean, the point remains that there's some, there's some.
Marissa, do you have the presentation slides on the projector?
Theater campus for a region also.
I'm sorry, can you repeat that? You're a little quiet.
Sorry about that. Do you have the presentation slides on the projector?
I do.
Okay, good deal. I just wanted to make sure. And are we gonna have the video of the full council once the meeting starts?
Are they gonna have the council full video again? Say that again?
The full council chambers on the video once the meeting starts? I'm only seeing like the picture of the flags. I didn't know if once the meeting started, if we were gonna be able to see all the members.
It may zoom out, but I'm not sure because I'm almost positive Metro TV is not there, but it will be streaming. So you'll be able to see WebEx streaming
Yeah, they had coverage for the
through Facebook and online.
primary responding.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I'll call Regan just to make sure everything's good on his end. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure they're not there, but Regan might be there and he might just zoom it out and do that the entire time. Like it won't go to individual faces. I believe that's what they've done in the past.
That's correct. Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that was gonna be the case.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marissa.
Yeah, no problem.
Located.
Really. That's one. I don't know.
That's where it's centered.
One is. All right. Consider pickup destination.
Fire and EMS. Die. So, I mean, and that's why Old Louisville is also, Old Louisville has this string of like really old Christian care and all these old people houses.
Yeah, there's a lot of density in some of those complexes.
And when the fire is called anytime anything happens. So, I mean, I think a lot of this is not
Well, I was at the one on
what we
Thursday.
would consider negative activity, right? It's just, we can't tell what's what from the data.
Yeah, I wasn't getting into whether it's positive, it's more.
Good to see.
Yeah, we're having lunch.
Yeah.
I look forward to it.
Great guy. I went connection between you guys. I was like, oh, that's cool.
Yeah. Oh. Lucky to have met him next to children.
Yeah. I guess your son is married.
Meg. Yeah, do you know Meg?
Yeah, she used to work at 21C in these hotels. And when I was, my law office was right above 21C.
It was it?
So I used to run into her in the elevator.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's another
Yeah.
connection with Craig for you.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, he found me that space. Downtown space and he connected.
Single household
Um,
parcels.
He even released, I forget who the property guy is. But
That was
he brokered it.
I like that.
And, yeah, I just rented, still rent from, I think it's called SW.
So we started looking,
There.
it was like,
Yeah.
So with the big expense to go through to find out which ones were defunct, no longer living, all of them but one, and he didn't care. So we put it all back in
But I
our.
hit it off all my cases.
Even though the legal the other one was this legal company?
Yeah, within the last,
Just take care of the client being screwed and.
not too many of them, but there are some like.
Yeah.
Random.
Yeah.
Tired of this.
Strip of land between this guy and this guy.
Yeah, that's my last big public trip.
So we could put them all in our name.
So far, it's so
And probably have a
good,
slightly
but
older ship.
enjoyed it.
Probably
I really
shit.
enjoyed it.
So you should have invested more than that. Kind of burned out.
They're hard to
Still,
I can only, and that's what
still,
it's, because Douglas goes, so you.
Depends on the year. Right now, I'm really busy. Stores Association, battery plants, over in
yeah.
solar projects, all these solar farms all over the state.
Yeah,
Don't need
studies.
Studies, so my wife's not real happy. I thought you were retired.
So you go down Blank,
Like these guys.
Ellis, all of that, there's the.
They trust on both sides.
and eight
Okay.
houses outside the center.
So it affects this contract.
Douglas.
Yeah, but because I was a longtime professor there, it's pretty easy.
Yeah.
Matt Ruth,
Yeah.
this is Kentucky State Demography.
And then you go up.
Brilliant. He makes.
Yeah, I mean, you can see from the ship.
It's weird.
It's like, he's nominally the principal investigator because he's a U of L employee today.
Okay.
The money is going from you all to him and then.
Yeah.
I recognize.
Invoices.
Right, okay, that makes
It's
sense.
kind of like a law firm.
Yeah.
I just never really get to say hello to you. I'm Shelby Summer about GLI.
Shelby, David Kaplan, good to see you. You haven't talked with Sarah a lot and Russ. Nice guy.
Always talking to someone, so I don't want to interrupt.
Absolutely, same. Yeah, we've been connecting quite a bit lately. Both are in Derby, Oaks and Derby, so I ran into her both
This
times.
question came out the other day.
Yeah.
Do they only use classes?
You go talk to Stephen Curry and you guys know each other?
This map, is this a logic map
Yeah, probably is, but
or is this one?
How's it going?
Yeah, this is logic. So that needs to go. It's home rule.
that was brought up today about the restaurant tax. In, that there are some, used to be fourth class, fifth and sixth.
It's population.
Well, that's.
You can
just
scroll
it.
back whenever you want.
Means you all could do it.
But.
But-
I would-
There's a lot of stuff.
Someone mentioned.
It's a lot,
Ah,
quite a bit.
When it comes to consolidated government,
So that's important.
yeah, rules are different.
rules are different, but they were all talking, some of them were talking about, well, you know, something's gonna have to help save us.
You guys have been waiting for a long time.
But by getting rid of those,
But
the way the law was written, it was by
That's
classification. So.
But-
They're
Yeah, I'll-
wanting to count now because.
I
it's
talked
home
to,
rule.
first gotta keep it.
and he explained about the home rule, but he said there's still all kinds of things on the books,
That you guys are probably longest.
KRS,
Think.
that refer to.
Class. And that's what I told them on this.
They haven't cleaned it up.
That's what I told them on the Zoom call today. And these folks were afraid that they need the restaurant tax now.
I'll let you know.
Afraid they couldn't even start it
Like,
because there was no more, they were no longer a quote subsidized city. So that's one of those legislation that should go, as you say, probably on population, not classes.
Yeah. They need somebody over there just to go back through the 50 years of legislation and just clean it up, a cleanup bill.
Yeah, I'll look at the schedule of budget here and try to figure it out.
You got new friends.
Oh, my new best friend. No, I'm not gonna come to your
But it
government.
comes,
You're gonna be- Michael Adams, yeah, I'll show up for that.
it's gotta look,
It's like it's cracking me up because I'm
yeah,
like,
so I would put in quite a bit for
I feel like I'm deported.
Well, that's not bad.
They just, budget hearings are continuously happening over the next month, so I'm not sure when Public Works is gonna be up. That's why I need to check, because that's when this would be talked about.
Which deputy mayor does it?
Nicole George. So she'd be the one that I'd be calling like, okay, are these projects in the queue? But yeah, it's under Nicole, and then there's a new,
I think we can get started.
yeah, I need to introduce you guys. She's brand new. She replaced Vanessa Barnes. Yeah, we need to.
For you. Okay, so you all seen the agenda, and I think we know that Professor Coombs is here today. He and his team have some important information to present to us, but I think the first thing we want to do is start with wrapping up an old item from our last meeting. Dr. Coombs, you've got some addition or some revision to make, I suppose.
Thank you, Earl. Hopefully when you came in, you saw the stacks of handouts up there. There's one beautiful set of color slides that we'll go through in a minute, but there's also two other one-piece sheets. One is just an update of the revenue discussion we had a month ago.
Yes.
And you might remember that one of the takeaways was that we did not want to get into the weeds of the Louisville Water Company and MSD revenues that are counted as part of Metro Louisville. So I pulled those out. I think it's $400 or $500 million total. And so I've got a new matrix there that takes those out. That's basically all that's going on in the top half of that. The bottom half of that includes some new information that we've gotten from the suburban fire departments. I've still got 2 or 3 more I'm waiting on for fiscal year 22, but there was some discussion last time about how much they get from intergovernmental revenues, state grants, and so on. And I filled that out more in this bottom table, as that may come up again today about fire departments and their services. So that's all that is. And then the other handout is the Metro's comprehensive annual financial report statement of revenues and expenditures. So I want to use that as we get into the expenditure discussion today as context for the discussion. So that's all I had.
Okay. Anybody have any questions about the revised chart that Dr. Coombs has presented? If not, then let's go on, if you wouldn't mind, Dr. Coombs, and go to your next presentation.
Okay, thank you. So this is this color handout that the staff was generous enough to print for us. It's 25 slides. It's too much to go through today unless you want to dig into certain pieces with questions. I pulled out maybe 8 slides that I thought we could get the discussion going with. And so I'd like to turn to slide, I think it's 6. Start there. So this will speed us up a little bit. So this is a summary of the expenditures by type of the 72 suburban cities we have data for, plus Shively, which didn't report, but I've added it from their budget documents. So we've got most of it. The few other suburban cities that did not file are very small. So this is really very representative of what the scope of services and expenditures of the suburban cities. And you can see police is easily the most important thing. It's 1/3 of their expenditures. I don't have a lot of detail on this. I mean, I know that, for example, I know that Jeffersontown, I think, has 54 sworn officers. That's the largest of the suburban police departments. But of course, St. Matthews has one, Shively has one, and so on. And then the general government, well, that's just going to be their basic operations. Streets, that is from the state revenue sharing money that we discussed last time. So that's distributed. It's a share of the state gas tax money that gets distributed back through a municipal revenue sharing formula based on population. So that's how the suburban cities repave their streets, do sidewalks. I can't remember if they can do street lighting with that or not, but anyway, that's where it goes. Sanitation, that would be the suburban cities' garbage service, garbage and recycling. And so that's the 4th largest thing in there. As far as I know, they all use private garbage services, Republic, Waste Management, Rumpke. They don't hire sanitation workers that I know of. And then pensions and fire. Shively is the only suburban city that has its own fire department. And there's that data there, looks like about 4.2 million. So, and then here's the overview for metro government, which obviously is much bigger and richer. And that's why I had this second handout, the one that has the big table that shows a summary of all metro government revenues and expenditures. So this will give you further detail on the scope. And today we will go through police, fire, EMS, corrections, public works, and libraries. So that's probably 2/3 of what Metro does that we will get into today. We've had tremendous cooperation from the agencies giving us micro data, address level data. We had, I think, 2.4 million records that MetroSafe gave us for all of their police, fire, and EMS runs the last 3 years. Same thing, Public Works gave us their whole paving plan by street segment. Corrections gave us a snapshot of their inmate population by address. And so that's what we're really going to talk about today. So let's jump from that to slide 8. Yeah, this one. And police, this is except for a few suburban departments, this is a county-wide service, and obviously they cooperate for cross-jurisdictional runs. But so from MetroSafe, I'm sure everybody in here knows, MetroSafe, the 911 call, handles all public safety calls for the whole county, regardless of where you live or what jurisdiction you're in. They all go to the old Federal Reserve Bank building over here, where if you've ever been in there, it looks like some kind of Pentagon dark room with screens, and they're dealing with the flow every day and dispatching police, fire, and EMS for the whole county, even if it's a suburban fire district or it's Jefferson Town's police department, the calls go in there. So this is, as far as I know, this is comprehensive of all runs for 3 years. And so Matt Ruther, who's here up in the corner, the state demographer, is also a GIS whiz. And so I fed him the data that I got from MetroSafe, and he created this map and also a whole lot of allocation tables that we can go into if you want. You can see that about half of the police runs were in the urban service district. And it looks like 16% to the suburban cities, 34% to the unincorporated areas. Now, Matt was just reminding me a while ago that those two dark green, the darkest green splotches there in this heat map, the top one is centered on the U of L hospital. So think of I-65 going right down through those two dark green places. The one on the bottom is U of L campus area. So that's police, and we can come back and get into details if you like.
Can you just, does your data, the data you looked at indicate why that might be true? Or do you have any otherwise, any understanding otherwise, why that would be the areas of the greatest calls?
If you look, this is the next slide, Earl, and here it is by jurisdiction. It gives you some idea. Notice that the University of Louisville Police is the 3rd busiest as far as runs. Matt, did you want to pile in there on? So we believe that this run data is based upon the address of the person needing the emergency service, or the calls coming in for police at that address. So now you do have 60,000, 60,000 daytime workers in the urban service district. So they don't necessarily live in the urban service district related to a police run. You can imagine situations like that. We have it by block. So if we can come up with a more specific question, we'll crunch it and come back to you with maybe a breakout inside the urban service district would be useful. And we could separate out the central business district and U of L by neighborhood. We have the data. Yeah. Yep. Push the button.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I want to ask a question about back on number 8, that one that we have. So
Yep.
the unincorporated area share of runs, we don't break that down into who makes those runs?
Yeah, that's the next slide.
Okay, that's what this one is.
So this is your primary jurisdiction.
All right, thank you.
Now, this gets more complicated than I can even understand, but when I met with the folks over there, they pointed out that, so every run gets allocated to the jurisdiction from which the address originated, but it could be that you have 2 different departments or 3 different departments show up, and 2 of them get there and the situation's under control and they turn around and go home. You know, so it's not a perfectly accurate representation of who does the work, but it's the best we have as far as geographic primary jurisdiction where the incident occurred. This would be the way I would put it. So there's St. Matthews, J-Town, Chively, just kind of what you would expect. The sheriff's office, I believe that's mainly delivering warrants. Tony, you could probably explain this better than me. The role of the sheriff versus Metro Police. They still can arrest people, I believe.
Correct. A lot of, I'm going to do my best. A lot of what they're doing is serving warrants.
Yes.
And then, of course, anything related to courts. So that's their primary role. A lot of the sheriff's personnel are part-time also. So they're brought in as needed, right? Depending on, events and things like that. But yeah, that's their primary function. They're not doing what I'll refer to as like the daily law enforcement that LMPD does.
Yeah.
Unless, again, with extenuating circumstances like during some of the civil unrest and all of this, obviously they needed to be augmented and so that they helped out, but that's not their primary function. Yeah. It's courts and warrants and those types of things.
So most of that 163,000 runs were court-related and warrants, picking people up. Yep.
Hey, Paul, this is Ken Fleming. I want to ask, my question might be, might not be totally accurate in the words I choose, but how much in a rough idea spillover is there in the runs? For example, you have, say the city of Indian Hills, they have their own police department. Well, it abuts the city of Louisville. So of those runs, you said that they might go there, LMPD might go and to see things under control or maybe the backup, and they may take off. Do you know how often that might occur in terms of spillover?
On some of these questions, I think if y'all want to really go deeper and understand it, you need to bring the chief in and have him explain it. They told me some of this. David James told me at the outset that even in the unincorporated areas and in the suburban cities, that if it's a murder, say, they're going to bring in LMPD for the most serious things. Now, to the extent, I don't know. I don't know how to measure it. We actually do have, as part of this run database, we do have the nature of the call. I mean, I guess we could mine that a little deeper and find out to what extent LMPD went to, let's say, a suburban city for a break-in or an assault or a robbery or something like that.
Well, I suspect it's probably, and I'm throwing spaghetti against the wall, I suspect it's probably in the single digits in terms of spillover between the bordering um, judicial districts or cities. That's gotta be a pretty small. So I hate for you to go through that process and find out it's gonna be really small, but I didn't know, just shooting from the hip, if this would, if it's, substantial or very minimal.
Well, we're looking at 1.8 million almost runs and, a few hundred of those were murders, but it's only a few hundred. Now, how many are robberies, burglaries, and more serious assault crimes? I don't know, but we do have the data and we're good at mining the data. If you all think it's important, we'll dig in and try to solve that. But when it gets into interjurisdictional sharing of responsibility, I'm not the guy to explain it. Some of the council members, like Tony, probably knows some of this. Chakori, I don't know if he's here, could explain it better than me institutionally, how that works.
Yeah, I don't, I mean, my gut feeling, unless somebody thinks different, I don't think it's worth going down that path, but I just didn't know if you had, like I said, a sort of a gut feeling, but that's all right. We can move on.
Okay. Let's go to number 12.
Paul, before you go, I want to make sure that I understand this page that we just were last on. So the map here are the, again, please distinguish this map from where the calls come into Metro Safe. This is where they're allocated in terms of where the local police might also be involved, or where they just simply
Oh, yeah.
distribute the call back to.
So this represents the site of the incident that somebody's calling
I
for
see.
help.
Okay.
And it could be anywhere in the county. And if, let's say that someone has broken into somebody's house in St. Matthews, they call 911, it goes into MetroSafe. They say, you're on such and such avenue, that's St. Matthews. They immediately flip the call to the St. Matthews Police, and St. Matthews Police goes and deals with it. That's the way it works.
Right. So this map here, the colored map, if you will, is the one where the call was ultimately or eventually sent to.
This is where the incident occurred.
Incident occurred. Okay, got it.
So it's the destination of the run, the police run to the incident.
Back to MetroSafe. MetroSafe is in whose budget?
Oh, that is County Metro Louisville. And Earl, if you look at that, that big table that I handed out,
Yes.
and you can see their budgets right here. Under, let's see, under public protection. You got Louisville Fire, you got EMS, Emergency Management, MetroSafe, $19.7 million general fund. See,
Got it. Thank
sort
you.
of a third of the way down. And this happened
Just
after merger.
In defense of my eyes, just very
Oh.
tiny. No way I'm going to read that, but thanks for pointing it out.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anything else? All right. So if you go to number 12, here's a similar heat map for fire calls. I noticed U of L doesn't stand out here, but Central Business District and the hospitals do. And again, you're looking at 54% of the runs going to the urban service district. 15% to the suburban cities and 31% to unincorporated.
Hey, Paul, could I break in real quick? It's Matt.
Oh, hey, Matt, sorry, echo in here.
About 50% of the fire calls are actually medical calls. So
What?
the majority of fire calls are medical calls.
We have separated out emergency medical services.
Yeah, but what he's saying is, generally speaking, on an emergency call, they send both an EMS truck and a fire truck. There's now I wish James Peden was still here because he was a fireman and an EMS guy and he knew all this stuff, Pat, but there's some code related to, proper deployment of these things, but depending on what the emergency is and what I'm assuming this is kind of what you're getting at is, yeah, there's certain medical emergencies where even though it's just a medical emergency, there's no fire, a fire truck and an EMS ambulance will show up simultaneously and both be deployed. Now, generally speaking, the fire truck just goes back and the EMS truck does their thing, but that's what's happening.
Okay. So we received separate files from MetroSafe on these three buckets: police, fire, emergency medical. And that's what I'm presenting today, but you're saying there's maybe some duplication here. If it's a medical thing, a lot of the fire runs are just duplicated and like you say, they turn around and go back.
The duplication is relevant though, because there's two services responding, right? So
Yes.
they may be in there twice to a particular address.
Okay. So that's a good segue. Unless you want to get in the weeds here. By the way, the next slide 13 gives you the breakout of the responding primary jurisdictions of these fire districts. And there's a map. The map is current. The table represents fire districts that many of which have been merged into the map, the 8 suburban districts that you see in the map on the left. But anyway, you can see the Middletown, PRP, St. Matthews, Okolona, J-Town, Fern Creek, Shively, they're the busiest. Anyway, so let's go to number 16. So now we're back to the duplication question, I guess, because this is the emergency medical cut of the data. And now we're at 48% urban service district, 15% suburban cities, 38% unincorporated. Over 405,000 records. All right, so I'd like to go next, unless you want to stop and go in the weeds here. I'd like to go to corrections.
Dr. Coombs, before we get into that, just talking about fire and EMS, is there a way to break out suburban fire and EMS, which I think is combined, right? I think, in other words, the budget that I've seen overall Louisville, your fiscal 21, 113 million. I think it's 115 million now-ish, right? Give or take a few million for all of suburban fire. I think it's suburban fire and EMS. I pulled up the Metro budget.
Yep.
Louisville Fire, this current fiscal year, was approved at 80 million. And when I go to emergency services, which should be EMS,
Yep.
52 million, so 130 some odd million. Am I doing that math right? 50, 180, 130. Yeah, right. 130 million between the two departments. But there might be things in emergency services that are beyond like Metro Safe, for example, versus just ambulances.
Oh, the overhead,
I'm sorry?
the central office
Right.
salaries, yeah.
Right. I'm wondering if there's a way to break it out per capita and compare the two things. Because although fire has a more clear delineation, EMS does not. And there's reciprocal agreements with fire, so they still cross the border, but it's just extremely uncommon. It only happens when there's a specific fire event that happens to be closer to a department that's across the border, and that's extremely rare. But EMS is flying all over the place. And when I'm looking at these total, when we're discussing, at least I'm thinking about it related to our committee, which is services, right? And we're looking at, okay, what are the services, who does what? It's hard to compare these things because it's a little more difficult to compare them. The suburban area has more population. In other words, non-USD is what I'll just call it, whether it's suburban or not, but it's non-USD, has a little more population. It is certainly geographically much, much bigger. So that needs to be accounted for. So I'm wondering if we can account for some of these where there are duplicative services. Police is different because again, LMPD generally has full jurisdiction and then you have these pockets
Yep.
where cities are filling in. but fire and EMS is a little more, direct. You can do more apples and apples comparison. I'm curious if we can break this down in a per capita or per square mile basis by cost.
So
If it was possible.
there's the per capita on slide 16 in the right column of the table. Square mile, that's easy to calculate. We
That's
could do,
runs per capita. Have we done cost per capita by any chance? Expenditure per capita?
yeah, so, let's see.
Dr. Coombs,
Yep. You are,
we were talking about the duplication on EMT and the fire trucks, but there may not be, because even though a ambulance and a fire truck goes, the dispatcher may decide that it goes for fire or it goes with EMT instead of charging it to both.
that sounds right. But the fire truck may turn around and go home and do nothing, but they were called.
Yeah, so they could report it either way, as for both or for just one of them.
Yeah, no, I understand. But still, whether they're both operating under the same standards for deployment, it's the same group deploying both, right? So they're making the call on, hey, you need to send a truck and an ambulance. So either what, and that's happening in Middletown and that's happening, in downtown, right? So I'm looking at it as, okay, total cost, USD, fire, ambulance, service. Can we break it down by cost per square mile, cost per capita?
Yeah.
And then same thing in the suburban districts, take the entirety of it, right? Don't pick one thing, but take the entirety of it.
Right, but we have to know how it's reported to know how many times a fire truck sent that, or how many times if it's distinguished, then there's more cost for each accountable run. If they're duplicated and we're counting both of them, then we do have the cost.
Actually, we do have that data because in the records that MetroSafe gave us, it not only has the destination of the run, it has the date and the time. So if a truck is sent and a EMS is sent at the same time to the same incident, then we know that's duplicate runs. Okay, we'll stew about that and come back with, certainly the square mile piece is easy to do. Yep. Where was it? Oh, corrections, 19. Yeah, so I met with the chief and their staff. They were real good. And within a few days, they gave us a snapshot of the population in corrections. So there were, you could see 1,953, and we have their addresses for most of them. They have a category called community at large, which is a lot of homeless folks that they have no address. And then you have some folks that you have an address, but they're not from Louisville. They were just arrested here for some reason. But for the ones that we have addresses, it was 60% urban service district, 8% suburban cities, 32% unincorporated. And so by my crude methodology, you can use that to allocate the $59 million in corrections budget that we've got into those categories. Oh, and here's the chart shows you a per capita measure of detainees per 1,000 residents. The one, well, there's two wrinkles to this we can get into if you want. One is it counts home incarceration the same as somebody who's using a bed at correction. So a detainee is a detainee in this database. And
You're saying then it gets the billionaires, as they would call it on TV, as well as the welfare recipients are all in the large.
well, there's all kinds of reasons to have home incarceration. If it's a nonviolent offense, it's a first offense or something, they generally do not want to put you in jail. I'm no lawyer, but that's my understanding. And I did ask them if they wouldn't mind breaking it out. I haven't heard back yet. They've got the data on home incarceration. And the other wrinkle is when we get into this $59 million corrections budget, I've been told that a large piece of that is medical. There's people get incarcerated that have very poor health. They may be pregnant. They may be HIV. And I didn't realize it, but Metro General Fund pays for that, the medical cost. David James pointed this out to me a few months ago, and I've asked OMB to break it out, but I haven't heard back yet. So how big it is, people say it's big. Now, is it 5 million, 10 million? I don't know how big of a piece of the budget it is. And I guess it wouldn't matter for our discussion if the geographic distribution of people needing medical services is the same as the geographic distribution of the general population of detainees. So, but without the data, I can't. Oh, and that's the other part, the medical piece of it, there really is only paper records. It's not digitized. That was the piece we discussed before about paper records. Well, it turns out Metro has great data on their inmate population. They have a beautiful dashboard on, as Ja'Cory pointed out, on age, gender, race, type of crime, et cetera. You can go look at it on their website, but they did not have geography broken out, which they have done for us with this address file. All right, moving along. If you want to keep moving, go to Public Works, which is 21, I believe.
Doc,
Uh-oh.
I remember you talked about addresses that are outside of Louisville. Did you account for the state sentence people who are in our jail?
Oh,
That's on the dashboard, and the number fluctuates, but it looks like the most recent one's about 84.
84 detainees are state. We're holding them for something that the state has.
Correct, as of May 12th. So today, that's the most recent number. And it's a lot higher in the past, but you know, there's been some work to get folks moved out. But the most recent number is 84.
Those individuals would not be in this data. They will be pulled out. So any individual who has no address, community at large, or is outside of Jefferson County, I left out.
Yeah.
Just on the last point, are you saying that if the state orders somebody held, that's only for non-county residents?
Well, he's asking why would Metro Corrections be holding somebody for the state?
I don't know. I know that's a question that I've asked the past several months when we were trying to decrease the population because it was overcrowded, and they've been able to relocate folks, but there's still 84 people in corrections.
But I think you said that they would not be Jefferson County residents. I was curious why that would be the case. But those who were Jefferson County residents and were being held on orders of the state would be in these data?
Yes. Okay. If we've got a Jefferson County address for them, it's in this data.
Okay. So
yes.
These are just non-county residents then.
And by the way, I did include on 18, I took this out of several of the old Metro CAFRs. They do a nice job in the back with operational statistics. So in a bunch of these agencies that we're discussing, I put together their history of employment and also their service volume. And Ja'Cory, you can see the number of prisoners has been falling steadily there for the last decade or so, with a little uptick last year.
Was the biggest dip because of COVID?
I don't know.
I'm assuming that the biggest dip of having prisoners there was because I know courts were delayed and everything else. That's why I was wondering if they just didn't put folks in jail or home incarceration or something.
Yeah. I don't know, Bonnie, but it makes sense. There's certainly a V there at the bottom, isn't there? In 21, and then it bounced back. Okay. Public Works, let's jump to 21 unless you want to get into the weeds. Because Public Works is it's kind of a hybrid. They handle, for the urban service district, they handle the garbage recycling pickup. And they also handle, they handle street lighting there. But for the whole county, they manage paving. And paving is, I can't remember, it's about $20 million a year of paving. And Jeff Brown gave me a great little seminar on all this, and he provided us with multi-years of paving data and explained their methodology. And it's very objective, professional, it seemed to me, where all the street segments in the county are graded on a road condition index, I think on a rotating schedule of every 3 years, something like that, where they inspect it and then assign a number. And then, the worse the rating, the more you move up in the queue to get repaved. And it's block by block. And so he gave us all their data, and Matt chopped it up with his GIS magic. And so this is their plans for next year. I wish I had it for last year, but this shows the breakout in the bottom table. Urban Service District getting 42%. So now the reason the unincorporated cities or the suburban cities are only 5%, remember, they get state municipal aid fund for their streets. But as Jeff explained, for through streets like a Bardstown Road or Hubbard's Lane, Brown's Lane, a street like that, Public Works does that paving even if it's in a suburban city. So that's why that number is not zero. They're that 4.7% in the bottom right-hand corner. And then 53% in unincorporated area. And it's back to Tony's question about, in fact, I've got it here. Yeah, the chart shows you the road surfaces. So you can see that the unincorporated areas have about 50% more road surface than the urban service district. So obviously, it's more spread out, a lot of 4-lane roads. And Matt calculated this with logic data, and you've got, 10.3 square miles total. And I'm assuming, Matt, that included the interstate highways because they show up on logic as a road surface. And so, but the Metro Works paving, I could only find 10 square miles. So I'm assuming the difference is interstate highways and a few state roads, federal roads that they do not have to worry about paving. And then finally, the last topic is, by the way, let's look at this a second. I didn't know about this. Jeff Brown at Public Works explained that back in 2015, there was a large bond issue for more street paving. As everybody here probably knows, Jefferson County really is disadvantaged by the state road fund formula. We talked about this last time. I mean, we get probably 40 cents on the dollar of what we should get if we were treated like any other county. So we don't get much state road aid. And obviously road conditions were deteriorating. So I don't know the history on it, but there was a large bond issue, the debt service paid out of general fund now, not out of the state road money. And that's why you see that spike there in 2016 and thereafter. You see we moved from only, 500 miles of street paving a year to more like 12 or 1,300 miles for the last 6 or 7 years. All right. Finally, libraries. Let's just go to this one, the last slide, 25. I met with Lee Birchfield, and I'd never met him, but he's the head of libraries, and I knew the previous head very well. And I asked him you know, what his background was. He said, well, before I was named head of libraries, I was head of information technology and data analytics for the libraries. I said, I met the right guy here. And he gave us a complete dump of all library patrons in the county by street address and the number of books or items that they've checked out in the last year. So we got circulation data by address, and then Matt aggregated it up to our geographies of interest. And the chart shows you the sort of utilization of the library. It doesn't account for everything. There's some other special things they do, but as far as books and movies and stuff you can check out, you can see here the suburban cities beat everybody there. And that may have something to do with access. It may have to do with education. You know, that's a whole other study to find out. If you look at the map that's on 23, you can see where the branches are, the 17 branches.
Dr. Combs, I think the advantage is 5 of the libraries are in cities.
5 are in the suburban
Yeah,
cities?
Middletown, Northeast, Shively, Jeffersontown.
Yes.
Northeast is in Linden.
Yeah, I would say part of the reason this is probably, there's probably a lot of reasons why this is skewed toward the suburban cities, not the least of which is in multiple occasions, those libraries exist through partnerships with the suburban cities.
Oh, yeah.
So for example, the prior Middletown Library, albeit was technically in the city of Middletown, was in a building leased by the city. We wanted to get out of that lease. So the city of Middletown had a building that they were leasing to a private business. They agreed to lease it for free as long as we continuously operate a library there to Metro. St. Matthew's Library is done in the exact same way. And it's incorporated with their city hall, for example. So you can imagine in those, even though if you look at the master plan of the library, it comports with how the library system wanted to spread out these libraries, at the same time, because coincidentally, they're smack dab in the middle of these suburban cities, you're going to get people, as they live closer, that are going to utilize them more.
So you're both saying access really raises the usage. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, St. Matthew's is literally incorporated with their city hall. So, I mean, if you're engaged civically with the city of St. Matthew's in any possible way, you're going to use the library because it's in the same building.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, the St. Matthews City funded most of that renovation of the Uline Library. That's gorgeous.
That's correct. Yeah, yeah, in the case of Middletown, it was a split. The city paid for most of the renovations to it, but it was renovations to an existing building, and even then, the city of Middletown took on certain upkeep, the roof and other things, right? That was part of the deal. But yes, St. Matthews, I think very uniquely, and I don't know if J-Town or Shively or anybody else has done that, but they put in millions of dollars, and I want to say it was upwards of 8 or so, into the capital improvement of that library. And then I think they lease it to the city for nothing.
I believe the Jeffersontown Library was actually built by the city of Jeffersontown.
Yes, and contribution to the Northeast Library, I think over $1 million plus was put in by the city of Linden.
Yes.
So you're exactly right. Most of these libraries being able to be in suburban cities were absolutely in conjunction with the city, who either provided the building, paid for the construction, and/or that type of thing.
Now, I would argue 1 million for the Northeast Regional, considering how expensive that one was, is probably a smaller fraction than J-Town or St. Matthews. But nonetheless, there was obviously a benefit to Linden that they contributed to in order to make sure it was in their area. But yeah, I mean, that probably lends to some of the differentiation there. And one of the things I would also say that if you were to, so you have the map here on slide 23. For example, there was a period of time when the Middletown Library was closed. And what I heard from people that map that you're looking at right there does not go to the county line in the east. So for example, somebody said, well, it's, 12-minute drive from the Middletown Library to the Northeast Regional Library. That's true. But the Middletown Library was in the westernmost part of my district. If you put a dot in the middle of my district, in District 19, and try to drive to Northeast Regional, it's about 25 minutes, 23 minutes is what it was.
Sounds right.
Door to door. So, yeah, I mean, as the suburban areas have built out, and again, I'll pick on my district, which has by far the most both multifamily and single-family growth over the past 4 years. If you were to, before the Middletown Library closed, now, we were cheating a little bit because St. Matthews was closed for renovations, but it was the most used library in the system, more than the main library, more than the regional libraries. Like, it was huge. Now, it hasn't recovered totally because since then, the Northeast Regional Library opened and St. Matthews reopened, but that's how much activity that like a library like that gets, because it's serving on a per capita basis. If you were to drop the 135 mile radiuses on some of these, you're going to see pretty big distinctions on how many. So, like for example, the density of some of the libraries from the main going into the West End and even just east of downtown, the distances there are much tighter, right? Now you have more people per square mile, but there's also been a lot of outflux of population, and we've covered that before. So, but we haven't moved the libraries. The libraries are still in the same spots from a master plan that was developed, frankly, I think 20 years ago right now. And they're updating the master plan, so they might adjust for some of these things, but that's not surprising in the slightest. But yeah, it is a little funky to see suburban cities so high on a per capita, on a per circulation per capita basis, but the partnerships exist, so.
Well, I had a question on that. This doesn't indicate, of course, but were these suburban city libraries opened before merger?
Oh, well, there's 3 new regional libraries that have been put in since merger.
Yes, I understand that, but I mean, the ones we're talking about here, the suburban city libraries were pre-merger?
Yes, yes, yes. So Earl, I think we could use some direction on what else to go after now.
Yeah, well, can you go back and say, because you mentioned what data you had that you thought was of good quality, but there were some that you had not yet gotten and/or maybe not quite as complete. Would you repeat what those were?
Yeah. And, if everybody wants to start thinking about this, that's why I brought this table that shows Metro's, basically their revenues and expenditures. Now, if you look at the expenditures, and you can see that we've got most of the big ones, but I've reached out to one of the biggest ones left is public health. And you can see the expenditures are, I have to get some straight line here to read all the way across, but I think it's the biggest one we've not looked at. Let's see. Public health and wellness. See, that's 43 million, whatever that is, 43 or 48 million. That's a huge number. How much of that comes out of Medicaid funding, Medicare funding? I don't know. I've reached out and we've sent emails, but I haven't been able to find anybody who will provide us data. So we're not going to give up on that one. Parks and Recreation, I got into that this week, and I know that they have an acting director, and I think there's about to be a national search for a new head of Parks and Recreation. So they recommended that I meet with the Parks Alliance and Brooke Pardue, and I met with her this week, and she got me really up to speed. But there's evidently no data on who's using the parks even the golf courses. We know how many rounds of golf are being played by golf course, but we don't know where they're coming from. And almost by definition, public parks are open to anyone from anywhere. And so there's no monitoring. So we don't know, we know how much, let's see what the parks budget is here. It's 30-something million dollars. Or I think it's about $31 million in last fiscal year. So I don't know how to allocate it if there's no data on who's using the parks. We could allocate it based upon where the parks exist, but what if a park exists, but it's not being used? And then across town, there's a park that exists that's being heavily used. There's just no data that I can find so far.
So Dr. Coombs, I think we should probably take some stab at this. Now, I will say that makes some sense, obviously. Now, I will juxtapose it with, I think the Parklands, which is as a public access park, let's put it that way, right? Albeit not a public park in that we don't fund them. They're not funded by the city or any other suburban agency. They're endowment funded and maintained along with donations. I think they do surveys from time to time and have a way that they estimate how many people use the parks. I'm not surprised to hear that Louisville Metro has done no such work, right? It may be interesting to, again, do the 135 mile, stick a pin in the park and do the 135 mile radius as a proxy for not having the amount of people that are using the park. Of course, the problem with that is we have different types of parks. Like, for example, we have destination parks. I would call that like a Cherokee or an Iroquois.
Yep.
We've got, I know particularly in the West End, we have what I'll just call pocket parks, right? Much smaller, more neighborhood, very close, tight. It covers maybe 2 city blocks, and then you have the neighborhood around it. In the suburban cities, okay, so you have that. Then the suburban cities, like I'll pick on Mayor Bonnie Jung in Douglas Hills. They would have no idea if I'm driving in there and using the park, right? So, and I talked about this with, so I've got Middletown in my district. Woodland Hills is the donut hole of Middletown, but they have a park, and that park is open to the public. There's zero restriction for anybody to use it, and they don't have any idea how many people are using it there as well. The HOAs. So my HOA has arguably 2 parks. Now they're small, they're not huge, but they're playgrounds and picnic area and maybe a ball field or 2. And other than doing an organized event there where you need to rent it or make some declaration, bless you, to the HOA, bless you, anybody can roll in and use those parks. There's no restriction even on parks that are privately owned and maintained. So
what I recommended to Brooke the other day was maybe we could do like, you familiar with Waze,
yes,
the traffic suggestion thing? Or if you Google a restaurant, you notice how it comes up and it shows you the activity by time of day. They're just tracking cell phones moving around the region, right? And I saw a piece in the Wall Street Journal a few weeks ago about downtown restaurant, have they come back or not? And they're using cell phone tracking data to see who's coming. They know where you're coming from and where you're going and how long you're staying.
that's right.
Now, that would be a very cost-effective way to find out
Let's do it.
who's using parks, the volume, when, where they're coming from. But we can't do it in this project because, that would be a year away if we started today. So we don't have any data, basically.
There's no way to even pull that data current, because I remember during the pandemic, there was, we were getting pretty much real-time data on how many people were going into the parks. And it was all public data. Like, you could go on websites and you could see that the Parklands had a 150% increase in traffic because it was the only place you could go. Right, like you couldn't go to restaurants, you couldn't go to whatever. So you were seeing these huge spikes of people going to all of our public parks, actually. But I mean, I'm using the Parklands as an example. But all of our public parks saw this massive increase. And then once restaurants started opening, you actually saw it decline again, right? And get back to what I'll call.
You're saying that that data exists
I-
on our public parks today?
I believe there were websites, not ours, but there were websites that tracked it. And I want to say it's like Apple's website, like apple.com has some tracking data in it. I want to say that's where I went. And you could pick locations and it would tell you so that there may be ways to do it, is what I'm saying. And we'll talk offline about how to do it. But I think your point is brilliant, though, on that being the way to track it. Again, I was going to say the caveat might be some of the smaller parks that I'm talking about, because a lot of people may be walking there, the ones that are pocket parks. But 99% of the time you're walking there with your phone in your pocket. So
Have fun.
yeah, right. So even there, I think it's still applicable. And again, I want to come back to, because I know the mayor's made a big deal about this in this Parks for All report that we've been talking about, having people within a certain distance of parks. We're looking at public parks. That's not the only game in town. Like, we really need to look completely holistically, because I am within the distance that is ideal to a park. It's not a public park, but it's a park that the public has access to. And I consider it having, the kind of access that I need. So it'd be a waste of time to try to build a park near me when in reality, myself and my neighbors have access to one. It just doesn't show up on our city's map, and we're cities not paying for it, right? So, but yeah, we'll talk offline. I'm almost positive Apple itself publishes some of that data.
Well, some of that's been a little complicated. The Olmsted Park Conservancy did have such data. And it was mostly it was developed during the pandemic, just for the reasons that Tony says there. But however, Apple has now put privacy restrictions, or at least given people the ability to put on their privacy restrictions. And so the quality of that data is not as reliable as it used to be. But that's not a reason why not to look for it. But I do think there's some limitations on whether or not it's as accurate as it would have been prior to that change.
So you're saying the Olmsted Conservancy actually had all that data on usage of your parks?
That's correct.
Wow.
And you know what? I just looked it up because I was like, I know Apple published this. It was called Mobility Trends Reports, and it was all this public data. They posted it during the pandemic, and they took it back down. As of April 14th, 2022, they shut that website down. So we might need to look at, we might be able to, it might be able to buy it for cheap. I don't know.
I think it's a long-term thing for the Parks and Recreation Department to look at, particularly if they're asking for a huge new investment in facilities and particularly the neighborhood parks, that they would want to lock in a baseline today to see how things have improved over the next 5 or 10 years. But that's beyond the scope of our project today.
I agree with you all. I think this is really important for services as we are going and looking and finding out what kind of services folks want. I mean, right now, summer's coming up. We only have 3 swimming pools open in the whole of Metro Louisville, other than the public pools that are in suburban cities and other places. There is a dire need for that type of thing, but it might not be a dire need in Fairdale. It may have older demographics that don't need pool. You might need more of where you've got a concentrated area of kids. And I think that as you move forward, you're looking at your park system, you need to offer what those people within that area want. We're about to get inundated with pool system this year, and we know how it was last year. Not having that one little thing, I know it's expensive, but it's also important, and that leads you to prioritize when you get to places such as parks. What do you prioritize? You need a basketball goal more than you need a swimming pool or a park.
Pickleball.
So I think it's really important that I have no idea how many people come into my park. I do know, so I have a brand new playground. It's inundated day to night. So that's something I think services interested in.
Okay, so you've mentioned 2 that you think might be potential candidates for more data based on the size of the budgets. Are there others? Parks was 30, what, 32, did you say?
Something like a 31, 32 million.
Does anybody, any one of the commissioners have any thoughts about other areas based on this chart here that might be looked at?
If we're still talking about parks, the parks growth study is something that needs to be looked at.
I couldn't hear.
I didn't hear that. Cindy, could you repeat what you said, please?
Hold on just a second, please. Okay, so what I was saying is if the Parks for All study, if we're still talking about parks, the Parks for All study needs to be looked at and that data incorporated into any plan. Did you hear that?
Yes, yes, thank you.
Uh-huh.
Mr. Chair, if I could add one more thing.
Please.
So Dr. Coombs, the only other thing, we've been looking at operational expense, I think almost exclusively. Yeah, I think we need to at least broadly look at capital. Now, we can talk offline about how to do that because we've looked at it before. There are some, let me put it this way, there are some capital projects that have massive, wide-ranging impact on the county, right? There are others that are much more specific to a region, at the minimum, a region of the city, right? But I do think we would be remiss if we didn't talk about, if we didn't have some analysis on just capital expenditure, because we're actually, and this is one of the first budgets we've gotten this far in, that normally, well, there's two parts to the cost of our capital. Number one is debt service, which
Which is
yeah,
paid by all taxpayers.
darn skippy it is. Yeah, right. So there's the majority of our capital is bonded. It used to be 100%. And I'm saying the majority now because it's one of the first budgets where we actually have $20+ million of what I'll just call pay-go capital. We're just, putting the money in and paying the capital as a part of the budget cycle. So either way, whether it's direct capital expense or it's debt service, to your point, the county is paying for capital, and it'd be good to get an assessment of how much of that capital is benefit. Some projects benefit the whole county. Some projects benefit regions. How is that being allocated?
So do you think that the comprehensive annual financial report, which is like 200 pages every year, does it break out each year's new bond issues and what the bond issues being issued for, the list of capital projects?
I know the actual budget breaks out the bond issuances and what they're for, but with the actual budget document, I don't read the CAFR often enough to tell you exactly what's in it.
Yeah.
So it may, and then even within that, we can get, and we can probably work with OMB to get a list of capital projects, right? So, depending on the period of time you want to look at and a few other factors, we can get lists of capital projects, and then there'd be a matter of interpretation.
Yeah.
And that's where we want to be clear with the whole committee on how that interpretation was made. For example, I've looked at these numbers before and, projects like the Omni, right? Now, you might say that supports the USD more than it does the suburban areas. At the same time, it's so huge and so prestigious to get a project like that. Waterfront Park, another example. Sure, it generally spans the USD, but again, it's something that has wide-ranging benefit, right? I walk in Waterfront Park all the time. I don't live anywhere near it, right? So, differentiating between that and other smaller projects but when you add them up, it's a lot of money that are much more localized, right, and where that money is going as well. So I think it's probably, and I'll juxtapose road paving capital, for example, versus other capital projects. Road paving capital, if you look at it, to your point, there is an incredibly regimented process in which they evaluate roads. So it doesn't matter if it's in District 19 or if it's District 4, it hits a rating and they put it on the thing, and that's how they're judging how much each district is getting. So some years I get a little more money, some years a little less, comparatively speaking, but it has to do with a very objective measurement, right? Versus a lot of our capital projects, I can tell you there's not a whole lot of objective measurement like that. There's political judgments that are made on what's funded and what's not funded. And so, getting some sense of how that's being used would be helpful as well. That'd be my other recommendation.
Okay, well, I'll work on that for your next meeting then. The capital stuff, I think we can do that. And, get in touch with myself, or Bill Hoyt's here too, and Matt Ruther, if you think of some of these other things that you think are worth, so much of what you see in that table, you could consider almost overhead. They're general, like codes and regulation, economic development, general government expenses. What do? You allocate it by population or something, I guess, but I don't think it's wildly interesting for this task force.
But does that say then with respect to those that have not been specifically looked at, they should just be allocated on that lumped together and allocated on that basis, or?
Yeah, and unless it's, something really obvious, like it's a charge for a service, which to me is kind of a wash anyway, like parking. There's a lot of parking revenues, right, in the park system, and it's a fee for service. So people get the service, they pay the fee no matter where they live. So I'm not sure it's worth you all worrying about where they come from. Unless if it's subsidized, that's a different matter. Then we might care about, who's using it and which may be different than who's paying for it. But I don't think parking garages fit that. It's basically there for our downtown workforce and for visitors and convention. They need a place to park. They pay a lot of money to park for a few hours, as I know.
Okay, so just wrap this part up then. There are two items, health services then and Parks and Rec. And then you look at capital, the budgets as well.
I think that's our next chore or set of chores.
Anybody have any other questions or comments for Dr. Coombs? Okay, so then if we thank you, Dr. Coombs, and your team, appreciate it very much. By the way, all this raises an interesting question here that I think that the commission will have to look at some point, and that is, what does this report look like at the end with all these data? I mean, we can certainly have the reports, but at some point, somebody's got to say, this is what it means, and this is the significance of it. And then I think it's something we have to discuss at some point, how that might be done, because I don't think the commissioners themselves are in a position to do that. Yet still, we don't have a contractor who would work on that. I think that's an important element to be resolved. Otherwise, we'll just have data and people will just sort of throw darts at it, or they'll whatever. And
one thing I think we can do, Earl, is like Ken Fleming's recommendation last time about a matrix that summarizes all the revenues from areas of town to jurisdictions. We can do the same thing on expenditure side and have from and to. And so you'll have two tables, one for revenues, one for expenditures, and then there'll be a net result.
Yes, but I guess I get to the question of, like we were just saying, so how do you deal with the question of whether or not an investment or an expenditure in location X is for the benefit of location X, or whether it's for the benefit of something larger than X? So what's the basis for that? And do we run the risk then that if we're simply talking numbers, they always say about liars and figures. So, interesting question there. I think it's something we'll have to discuss. Okay, so if the committees have got any reports, I think this is a good time to hear from them. Mr. Arthur.
I can just share real quick. So Councilman Piagentini and I met with Dr. Coombs and we talked about city services. And we went through ordinances from 2003 that actually organized Louisville Metro government, specifically the executive branch. And we noticed that that original ordinance, Ordinance 11, 2003, Series 2003, had a lot of references to cabinets and departments that have different titles, and services have changed with those titles. So we've been doing a lot of work on our end trying to figure out from mayor to mayor over time, how have the names changing and the departments changing impacted the services that they were supposed to provide and where those services were supposed to be provided. So we're still working on that, but I just wanted to share with folks. And then also just to add an extra nuance, every year when we approve the capital and the operating budgets, we essentially approve to change the structure of the government, but the mayor still has the power to make changes and move positions around and names of departments around. So it's very messy, but we're hoping that through that mess, we can figure out if there's some issues with services that are supposed to be provided within it. Thank you.
You.
Earl, let me just add one thing to what he said, because I was not aware of this. Ja'Cory pulled up the 2003 ordinance, and it's germane to our discussion today. It says that Metro Louisville will provide emergency medical services to the whole county. So in 2003, am I right, Ja'Cory, that the intent was Metro government was going to be the EMS provider for the whole county? Since then, 7 of the existing 8 suburban fire districts have added EMS services at great expense, raising the tax rates 50 to 80% on your property in those jurisdictions. And obviously the service times are better, the scope of services are better, et cetera. But the ordinance still stands that pretends that the county is the EMS provider. So that's something that's dramatically changed since merger. Probably of all the things that we've looked at so far, that's probably been the biggest thing that's changed in my view.
Did you come across anything which would indicate let's say the legal basis on which these cities or these fire departments, et cetera, were constructed or created? Was that done by state law, by ordinance? Do you have a sense of that?
That's another issue. I'm no lawyer, but from what we've learned, the suburban fire districts and the EMS services, they don't stand for election in the general cycles like other elected officials do, even though they have the authority to raise taxes on taxpayers in their districts, which is a majority of the county. So they are managed by boards, and the boards are elected at a meeting that they call, and people are recruited to be on the board, and those people then can vote to raise taxes on your home, business, tangible property, and motor vehicles. And they used to be all the fire districts in the suburban areas, it was 10 cents per $100. They were all the same. Now they're 15 cents, 16 cents, 18 cents, dramatic increase. And that was, I'm assuming, to pay for the EMS services, and which has a side benefit to the homeowners out there that they get lower homeowners insurance on their home because response times are better. There's all this math behind that. Sorry, Corey.
I just wanted to add, Councilman Piagentini brought up how some of these boards and the elections aren't really consistent. They don't happen in regular election cycles, and people can just invite their buddy and they will come in and win an election and then decide to raise some of those taxes. So we did talk about figuring out how we can have some alignment with that as well, just to make it a much more transparent process.
Okay. Thank you. Scott, any developments on gaps?
No, we've not met. We were waiting for Dr. Coombs to finish this last run, so we'll be now reconvening and kind of heading down our path. So we'll have an update at the next meeting.
Thanks. And then, Ken, I guess you all presented on revenue last time. I don't know whether you have any additions to what you said last time. Are we waiting for something else, or are you guys done?
Thanks, Chairman. I don't have anything else to report at this point. We need to pull the committee together to just talk about what other issues or thoughts or things we want to peel back over the next couple of weeks. So I'm going to try to call a meeting in terms of going through that process and to talk about it a little more. But I just want to go back to what Paul mentioned, and that is a lot of these fire districts, and it's a statute that allow them to do this in terms of providing EMS services. And it is, I'd say a fair portion of them go up to 20. There are some at 15, some just stayed at 10. But I think the councilman mentioned correctly is that these elections are held in sort of an odd time, and unfortunately, they're not publicized very well. And if they are taxing jurisdictions, and that probably needs to be elevated or changed or looked at least from the state level, to maybe get them on the same cycle of the general election, in order to get a little more awareness for people to understand when they vote for folks, they know that they're voting for somebody who potentially can reduce or increase their taxes. Because right now it needs to be, as he said, a little more transparent, and has a little more better protocol in order to do that process. So that's something we probably need to look at and could be included in our recommendations.
Thank you. Any other business? Not, we'll adjourn. I think our next meeting will be, I don't have the date in front of me, but it's always the third Friday of the month. June 16th. Thank you, Bonnie. Okay, see everybody then. Have a great weekend.
Thank y'all.
Thank you all.